I always knew I wanted to be a composer since I was a little boy. I like to create my own little melodies in my head. I like to sing. I knew I wanted to be a composer, but I didn't know how I could possibly be a composer. I lived in a geographical location that was pretty far away from the world that I thought I could be a part of, or that I wanted to be a part of. My parents were farmers in Ontario, north of Toronto. They were immigrants and very far apart from a musical world. But I knew I wanted to be a part of that from watching television shows, from listening to music on the radio, both classical and pop, from watching film. I knew I wanted to somehow express myself musically. When we were growing up, I had some friends. We all enjoyed films, and I had a Super 8 camera.
How about a drink, Mr. McDonald?
We decided, hey, let's script a film, let's tell a story, and then at the end of it all, I'll write some music. I'll create a musical score.
And when it is finished, I will be the most powerful human on the face of this planet.
For me, that was one of my first forays into theatrical or dramatic collaborations as a teenager. But it was something that built an interest, gave me a bug to want to do more of it, to want to tell stories, to want to be a musical storyteller.
Where were we anyways?
You were punching in my head.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You can sort of mimic the orchestra and sort of get a sense of, as a music composer, your job is a lot like a story writer or a novelist or a playwright. But I'm not working with words, I'm working with notes. And I tell my stories with rhythm and with melody and with harmony and with violins and with trumpets and timpani and woodwinds and singers, flutes, oboe, clarinet. These are my words. An opera is my book, is my novel, is my film. As far as a composer, I guess I'm behind the scenes. I always liked to be behind the scenes. I never wanted to be on stage performing. My first opera was Philomena. I wrote it between 2001 and 2003. Philomena has a very dear and soft spot in my heart, I think because she was my first opera. The opera told so many different stories and it hit so many different things on my shopping list that I was looking for when I was first exploring a possible story for my first opera. I wanted the opera to be a true story. I wanted it to be a Canadian story. I wanted it to be a story about immigrants. And I feel as though there's so many interesting immigrant stories that need to be told, and certainly on the opera stage. So I felt like those were things that I wanted to hit in this piece, and it's gone on to have a little bit of a life, so I'm grateful for that.
John has a way with his music of reaching the person emotionally, highs, lows, passions, angers, fears. He doesn't compose for his own sake. He composes to communicate, and that's the best kind of composer.
It's funny because I come home after a performance of an opera or one of my pieces, and to come back and say, oh yeah, I remember all those days that I struggled here. One of the #1 questions I get asked is, what is it like to be singing in an audience and hearing your piece performed live on stage? And I always say, feels exactly what you think it might feel like times 100. In addition to having ballet use my music, some film producers, some film directors have also used my pre-existing musical compositions as inspiration for films. I've always been interested in astrology and the stars and what's above our heads, and that provided inspiration for a few of my compositions, Borealis and Solaris, just to name a couple. And one filmmaker in the United States approached me, and he somehow, somewhere heard my music and asked if he could create a film that was inspired by my music, but also inspired by the Northern Lights. And I said, absolutely, go for it. And he created a wonderful nature film, which is performed with a live symphony orchestra with the film projected on the screen behind them. For the future, I'd just like to keep doing what I'm doing. It's so much fun. I feel like there's still more to say, and there's still more to do. I'd love to do another film score. I'd love to do another opera or two. I'd love to write a musical theater piece. I'd love to do something with Cirque du Soleil, for example. It'd be kind of fun to write music for these big spectacles. It's always something that I've been drawn to.
John, I think, is one of the foremost Canadian composers there is. In 100 years from now, we'll still be listening to his Philomena or whatever his next opera may be, and his music will be a part of Canadian history, and we will be more fortunate for it.